Rise from your grave.
How about that? Yeah. Welcome to episode number 8 of the Retro Gaming Roundtable. And before we get started on our topic, please help me welcome our special guest today, Joshua from the NeoTurboManiac channel. Joshua, man, thank you for joining us.
Thank you guys for inviting me, man. This is awesome.
Awesome.
I've seen a bunch of these, and they're very fun. They're very fun topics, very engaging material, and it's great to be a part of this.
Well, it's an honor to have you.
Thanks.
And let's introduce the rest of the roundtable. We're going to start with Jason from Kinda Cool, the Kinda Cool YouTube channel. Then we're going to head over to Lyndon from Old School Games and Stories. And then the Grizzly veteran, Mark from Dad Racer. So before we get started on our topic, we usually do our YouTube shout outs. So let's get started with that. I'm going to go ahead and kick that off. So this week, my YouTube shout out is Retro Game Rarities. I don't know if you guys have seen this yet. I kind of stumbled upon this channel lately. And well, let's just say he's got a series called CRT Junkies. Yeah, I'm in. Sign me up. And he goes into doing some very cool in-depth reviews of some of the Sony Trinitrons that he has and CRTs that he has. But he also just posted a video not too long ago of Demon Attack on the Atari 2600 where he scored 100,000 points. So nice. Yeah, very cool, man. So Retro Game Rarities, and of course we will have links to everybody's channel that's on the roundtable, plus our shout outs in the description. So Joshua from NeoTurboManiac, do you have a shout out?
Yes, I do. And my shout out is Engelbard Gaming. And his specialty is comparison videos, usually between an arcade and a console port of it. And the way he does it, it's very interesting because he runs the gameplay from start to finish, both versions running at the same time. And he'll go in depth talking about the differences between the home and arcade version, detail, sound, audio, gameplay. And it's really top-notch stuff, considering that, you know, he has a skill to do some really difficult games, such as probably the best example I can come up with, Strider. Like, you know, games that are otherwise hard to complete. The fact that he's doing this, you know, start to finish on a lot of these, it's really impressive.
Something that I would like to be able to do, but I'm not finding the skills to do that. That's very cool, man. Very cool. Yeah. Jason, you got a shout out for us?
Yeah, I've got an interesting one this week. So mine's going to be Overcomplicated with Dominic. And so I met Dominic he was leaving some comments in some of my videos about some of the retro gameplay, like how to beat Mike Tyson from Mike Tyson's Punch Out and things like that. And I always assumed he was just like, you know, an older guy, maybe our age-ish or, you know, around that. But when I saw him actually kind of complete his actual channel and I, you know, peeked into his world, I realized he was a pretty young guy, you know, and I was pretty shocked and kind of warmed my heart a bit to see a younger guy out there doing the things like we do. And we're always talking about who's going to pick up the torch and do this after we're all gone. And it's going to be guys like Overcomplicated with Dominic that do that. And he, you know, he grinds at these old games too, man. I mean, he can beat Legend of Zelda and, you know, I think he had Dragon Warrior on his list and Hydlide. Who here can say they beat Hydlide? You know, I can't say that. And I think sometimes we get all wrapped up in, you know, complete collections and boxed examples of games and mint condition of hardware. He's got a scrappy little collection of hardware. He's got a box about yay big of some NES games. And I can tell he loves every one of them and he plays every one of them. And he does a really good job. He's a Tetris whiz. Just, you know, like I said, man, it warms my heart, brings a tear to my eye, all those types of things to see the younger generation kind of not playing Fortnite and doing this type of thing. And I got to give him all the props in the world. Overcomplicated with Dominic. So that's
very cool. Very cool. Lyndon.
Well, I got one here. It's Jason's House of Fun and Video Games.
Yeah.
Really cool guy. He's one of those guys you can watch for about a minute and you already know, yeah, I'd like to hang out with him. Big time collector. And man, he's got a collection behind him. I mean, it's floor to ceiling, wall to wall, all four walls. He's got some arcade games. just a bunch of stuff. And he's a collector of all things from the 80s, action figures, different figures of different things. He loves old movies, especially the horror movies. And he has a big Sega CD complete and box collection.
Yeah.
And they're right behind him. And you can see those things from a mile away.
Yep.
They look so cool. And again, this is a really cool guy. Does a lot of collection pickup videos, and he's just one of those cool guys you want to sit and listen to for a while. So go check him out again. That's Jason's House of Fun and Video Games.
Very cool. Mark from Dad Racer, got a shout out.
Yes, my shout out this time is Bit Wars. Once again, really awesome guy. He's got, just like Lyndon said, another guy with a big wall of credibility behind him. Huge video game collection. He does this thing where he has like an alter ego. Very, very entertaining stuff. He recently did a video from the Midwest Gaming Classic up in Milwaukee. Made me very jealous that I wasn't there. I think he said something like he's been there for the last 10 years and I've never been one time. So really made me want to check that out sometime. So go check him out. Bit Wars.
Very cool. All right. Great shout outs, man. Great. We also want to take this moment just to remind you that we do have a Discord server. That Discord server link will be in the description. We invite you to come in, chat it up with us. We have some really great conversations going on. And I know that we all would love to see you in there and would love to talk to you. So we will have that Discord server link in the description. All right, so we are going to start with our topic of the day, and that is the most important and influential arcade games. And we're all really looking forward to Joshua's input on this, because I couldn't think of a better guest to have on for this topic. We also want to hear from you guys, though. We want you to put in the comments, what are the most important arcade games to you, the most influential arcade games. Let us know what we missed, because I'm sure we're going to miss a few. All right, so let's get started on that topic. Joshua, are you ready to kind of kick us off with your first pick for most influential and important arcade games?
All right. So my first pick is a game I've mentioned numerous times. It's one of my all-time favorite arcade games, one of my all-time favorite video games, period. And my favorite of this type of genre, the brawler, and that is Final Fight. Now, Final Fight, the first time I ever saw Final Fight was around late 1990. Was at a candy store where I used to live in Brooklyn, well, actually in Queens. A little candy store. I saw this saw Final Fight, and I'm like, wow, this is impressive, because it's not the first brawler of its kind, but you had Double Dragon, you had Renegade, Kung Fu Master, but geez, Final Fight. When you saw a game with really large characters and enemies that flooded the screen, and the game ran so smoothly, that's something that you want to play. And I think also Final Fight set a lot of tropes that you find in arcade games, such as having three very distinct characters. A guy, Cody Haggard. They have the small, fast but weak. You have the balanced guy in Cody. You got Haggard, the big, strong, slow guy. Lots of other brawlers have imitated that. One of my favorite aspects of Final Fight, and I don't know how often this gets mentioned, is how Final Fight captures the look of a city that's in turmoil, that's like in such a bad state of disarray or something like that. If you look at like the first level, we have like the slums, the trash all over, the buildings that are torn down, the decay, and the subways. You have the graffiti with the windows smashed open. In the Bay Area, you have the bathroom stalls with graffiti and some of the doors knocked to the side. Definitely not a place you want to go use the bathroom. That's like one of the things that really appeals to me compared to most other brawlers, is just the way it captures that look. Even brawlers that have come after that don't really do it as well as Final Fight did. And of course, Capcom even after Final Fight, Capcom followed up further. I mean, with games like, I think with a couple of years after that, you had Captain Commando, you had Cadillacs and Dinosaurs, so many others that I can. And Alien versus Predator.
Mhm.
So Capcom even followed up with that, and then of course other companies got in on the action. You got Westone, which did Riot City. SNK even got in with Burning Fight, and of course, how can I forget Sega with Streets of Rage?
Right.
And I mean, I'm a big fan of Streets of Rage, part 1, part 2 especially. But man, Final Fight I think really set the bar high as for what you would expect in a brawler. And then not only just the gameplay was highly imitated, even the characters. I mean, Cody.
Yeah.
I mean, Cody's like probably the most commonly emulated character. Burning Fight had a character like Cody. Riot City had a character like Cody. So there's so much there that Final Fight brought to the table that many brawlers imitated or tried to duplicate, I should say, regarding the gameplay, the canned combos, the whole the tropes of the different types of characters. And it's a game I still play to this day, and I never get bored of it.
Absolutely. It really did take that genre to the next level. And yeah, absolutely agree with that. A lot of games tried to imitate, and of course it was a trendsetter. Jason, what is your first pick?
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that one, Joshua. I mean, I still say that's the best beat 'em up of all time. The Final Fight arcade game is the best beat 'em up of all time. It hasn't been beaten yet, so we'll see. They're starting to come back out here a little bit, but I think it's going to be my favorite for quite some time. But I'll go ahead and jump into mine. So my first entry up is Operation Wolf. This is titled Operation Wolf from 1987. And, you know, you think about the shooting gallery games, they've been around. They even predate the arcades, you know, the video game arcades. They go back to like the water streams and BBs and all those things shooting targets. It was inevitable that they'd work their way into the arcades, and they did. So I got to give credit to a couple games that kind of paved the way for Operation Wolf before I get talking about that. Cheyenne was one that had a really kind of realistic rifle mounted to it. And also Crossbow, a medieval game that had like a really kind of somewhat realistic crossbow as well. I think they paved the way for Operation Wolf, but Operation Wolf, I feel like kicked down the door, you know, and it was all about that Uzi. You know, if you think about that Uzi machine gun that was mounted to, I was a kid of the 80s with, you know, Schwarzenegger, Stallone. We were Army kids, and we knew our AK-47s from our M16s, from our Tech 9s, and we knew an Uzi. And I swear to you that thing felt about as real as any kid could have ever imagined an Uzi could feel in his hand. It had some heft. It was a visceral rush when you pull that trigger, and it really felt like it was doing something when you played that game. So it was pretty incredible. And it was really kind of the starting point that got kids, you know, playing that one, people playing that one. But the game itself was good. You know, I mean, it was obviously a shooting game where you're shooting everything on the screen. Everybody's bad, but obviously the POWs you're trying to save, and there's some nurses and some things go across the screen as well. You've got to avoid those guys. And you've really only got 2 action buttons besides moving the gun around. And that is the trigger, which I talked about earlier, which felt really awesome to pull. And then you had a grenade button that basically launched like a kind of missile grenade for like tanks and helicopters and things like that. But it wasn't, you know, wasn't rocket science. You could figure out pretty quickly. You could have fun playing this game. And like, you know, the graphics weren't stellar, but they were solid for the time, and they were better than any shooter we'd seen previously. But again, it all kind of comes back to how fun it was to operate that Uzi. Just get behind the wheel of that thing and just go to town, you know. You know, and there were some home translations of this game too, and they kind of lost something. And if you look at like the NES version, which actually was graphically pretty good, you know, it didn't have that Uzi, and the light gun didn't work quite correctly. And so it lost something in translation. It really kind of showed the magic of that whole mounted gun with that heft and that realism to it. And this game really paved the way for a lot of future shooters. I mean, we had stuff like, you know, Virtua Cop and House of the Dead and Area 51, and the list goes on. And those were kind of mainstays for the arcade for quite some time. I mean, we saw shooters for quite a while after Operation Wolf. You know, even Operation Wolf itself got a sequel, Operation Thunderbolt, which was a little, you know, undercooked. But I mean, the shooters weren't going anywhere for quite some time. And I really think that this is the one key game that kind of kicked that whole thing off, and that's Operation Wolf, and back in 1987. So that's my first pick for influential or important arcade games.
Yeah, that's a great pick.
Nice.
That's a great pick, and it's always something that the home consoles wanted to duplicate, was that arcade experience. But man, you couldn't do it with Operation Wolf.
Tough to pull off when you've got something that's that incredible, like they had with that hardware mounted to that arcade unit.
Absolutely. All right, Lyndon.
Well, I think it's only fitting that I talk about racing games. So let's talk about the very first arcade game that had
Nice.
steering wheel. And believe it or not, you got to go way back for this. In 1974, Atari released a game called Grand Track 10.
Wow.
And this was the first video game that worked with a steering wheel. Now, there were games before that had a steering wheel, but they were the electromechanical games where it had like a scrolling reel of a screen that come by like this, and the steering wheel moved just a little bit left and right, and there was a little car on a stick that done this, and you change lanes. So, of course, that's the inspiration for this. But Atari went to work, and they programmed a steering wheel to work with a video game. And I have played this game before at a retro arcade in Greensboro, North Carolina. And of course, they've got a big sign on it that says the first racing game, which is drawed me right to it. And I was like, here's my money. Let me play it. And this game plays really good. It has 3-speed gear shifter on it and reverse, gas pedal and the brake on the floor. And it's one of those steering wheels that spins forever. So when you go around a tight turn, you can just whip it like that. And it's also programmed that when you stop, if you spun it this way 4 times, you don't have to go back this way 4 times. It knows when you stop to go back a little bit this way, and it straightens back out. And when you hit the brake, it's almost like a drift. It throws it sideways, and you do that. You touch it, and it throws it sideways, and you gear it down to keep the RPMs up so you can keep your speed up through the tight turns. So believe it or not, for the first ever racing games, the mechanics of this are really impressive. Graphically, not so much. It's black with just white graphics. Little dots outline the track, and your little F1 car. It's nothing impressive graphically to look at, but to play and know that this is the first one in 1974, it's very impressive. So not only was this the first video game to use a steering wheel, I'm getting ready to talk over my head a little bit. I just seen this fact, thought I'd throw it out there. The circuit board of this video game is the first one to use an integrated circuit-based read-only memory. It's the first ROM video game, which of course become the standard for how video games are made. So not only is it the first steering wheel, it's the first ROM game. So, and also when you go into an arcade, this steering wheel appeals to all ages. When you see this as a kid, you're thinking, oh, well, that's like the big kids, the cool teenagers. They get to drive their car around, go hang out with their friends without their parents anytime they want to. That's what you thought anyway. So it appeals to little kids, teenagers. Come on, guys, you know, teenagers, we see this. Are we not going to compete with this? So who can drive the best? Take my quarters right now. Even adults, you know, think about parents back then who knew nothing about arcade games. They're looking at games with joysticks and a bunch of buttons. It's just over their head. You see that steering wheel? Oh, wait a minute now. I know how that works. I mean, I might could actually have some little fun here. So just the peripheral of and the challenge of making a steering wheel work with a video game, you got to take your hats off to Atari for accomplishing this. One more little tidbit that I found to show the importance of this game. When this came out, it was an instant success. I think it was one of the highest grossing games for a couple of years there in the mid-70s. This particular game made Namco cancel all of their electromechanical games. They quit right then and jumped over and knew they had to start making video games, and they had to put their heads together and come up with something good. And we know what Namco went on to do in the late 70s and early and mid 80s with arcade games. So you throw that in. So how important is Grand Track 10?
Nice.
That's all I got on that one. So,
well, I think you dropped some knowledge bombs on us right there, man.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Excellent pick, man. I had no idea the history of that. That's awesome.
Yeah, put us to shame with the research.
Yeah. Wow. Did he ever?
Absolutely. And
It's
so
a racing game. You know I'm going to be into that.
and guess who gets to follow Lyndon? I'm sorry, man. Mark, you're up.
I'm guessing that's me.
Yeah.
Well, I think I'm the baby of the group. I was born in the mid 80s, 84, late 84. So predominantly my arcade experience was in the 90s, particularly the early to mid 90s. And today, for my first pick, we're going to talk about Street Fighter II, which came about in 1991. Undeniable impact on video games, the fighting game industry as a whole, even though obviously there was ones before. There, Street Fighter, the original Street Fighter, of course. However, this, like Jason was saying, really kicked down the door for fighting games. There was also Pit Fighter, I think, that came around in 1990. And I remember that being very impressive, seeing that. The NES port, not so much. Or maybe it's the Super Nintendo port, not so much. But Street Fighter 2, 200,000 cabinets sold. That's right. I've done a little research myself. $2.3 billion.
Wow.
In sales just from quarters from those 200,000 arcade cabinets. There was also several versions of the game. There was Street Fighter 2, Street Fighter 2 Turbo, Champion Edition, Super Street Fighter 2. I don't know how many other Street Fighter 2s they can come out with, but I believe those were the main ones. I had a funny story about Street Fighter 2. Again, born in late 84, it comes out in 91. So I must have been 6 years old when I first saw this game. And there was an arcade that I used to go to at a mall. It was called Cyber Zone. It was in this mall called Gulf Mill Mall, not too far away from where I live. Obviously, all arcades are pretty much long gone, as they used to be. But here was Street Fighter 2. When Street Fighter 2 came, I never seen such a crowd surrounding an arcade game in all my life. And I do remember the crowd. I mean, I was very young, but I do remember this. And I could never get a chance to play it. Except for one day, I finally got a chance. I got to go up to the game when nobody was there. I don't know how this was even possible. Maybe everybody was still in school and I just got my chance. Get up to the game. I start playing it, fall in love with the game. I'm probably playing, I'm pretty small, so I'm not playing it with the controls down here. I'm probably playing it like this because what am I, 4 feet tall or something like that at the time? Having a great time. And then all of a sudden, all these, bigger kids start to come and they start to crowd around me like they're waiting their turn. I don't know if you remember this, but people used to stick quarters on the glass.
Yep.
Yeah.
I've got a really vivid memory of this one particular time. People started to stack their quarters up on the glass, right up on there, the bezel. I didn't know what was going on there. I had never played a game that was this popular. I'd never seen that before. Okay. So just to put you into context here, I get a game over or whatever, and I start to grab one of the quarters. Like it was almost, I thought people were like, I thought it was like a
donating to your,
they're like donating, it was like a charity to me. Oh, this little kid wants to play. I don't know what I was thinking. This is a 6-year-old brain, And I started grabbing one of the quarters, and then I remember this guy just shoving me out of the way, like, get out of here. Very embarrassing. But that's my memory, my first memory of playing, getting a chance to play Street Fighter 2. And later came and got it on the Super Nintendo, which was felt like arcade perfect. Just an amazing game too. That had such a major impact. I swear, if you mention, what's the first fighting game you think of to 10 people, probably 9 out of 10 of them will say Street Fighter 2. And Mortal Kombat and Killer Instinct and all those, very influential. But Street Fighter 2, to me, is the first one that comes to mind.
Absolutely. That's a great pick. And I do remember those days, putting the tokens.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, I remember that.
I don't know how did that even work? So refresh my memory here. Let's say I in my head, there were like 15 quarters up on the glass there. Okay. How do we establish order here?
Whoever put their quarter up there first goes next, man. Yeah. But
Yeah, I don't know how that worked though.
I know,
mean,
you
it's
know,
funny.
I don't think
it was kind of half honor system too, right?
Yeah.
Because
Right, yeah.
the people in the line would know who put that quarter first, and they'd kind of enforce anything that you try to go wrong or sideways, So
Yeah, it definitely did for me. It definitely went sideways for me.
well, I think Street
Well-
Fighter 2 was like the first time you would see, I mean, tons of quarters and tokens lined up, and the crowd of people, like you said, even people just watching, it's pretty amazing.
Right.
So that's a fantastic pick, of course. And all of these games that have been mentioned, there's been clones. They've tried to duplicate these games. And if you think about how many Street Fighter clones, I mean, it's ridiculous,
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm going to kind of show my age a little bit here with my picks. And this is one of my all-time favorite arcade games and one of my all-time favorite Atari 2600 games. This particular game sold 360,000 cabinets. It came out in Japan in 1978. And it is called Space Invaders. And there's been clones of Space Invaders made too, but it is the very first game I played on the Atari 2600, and I wanted to play it because I had played the arcade game. And I mean, if you think about it, back then, it was such a simple concept, and it was kind of like Breakout, but it was kind of the first shooter really ever made, because you were shooting and you had the pattern of enemies marching down towards Earth. And then, of course, your shields that would decay over time because they were, the enemies were blasting holes in it. And so it took a lot. I did some research from Breakout, and you can kind of see how it did do that. But you were actually shooting instead of bouncing a ball back and breaking, and you had a moving enemy coming down at you. It was challenging, but it was easy to understand the rules. So it was very easy to play, but very challenging to play and very, very entertaining. And the rumor is, and I don't know if this is true, I tried to find out today, I kind of delved into it a little bit more, but the rumor is that in Japan, it caused a temporary shortage of the 100 yen coin when it came out, because it was such a big deal and there's so many coins being fed into Space Invaders. It is the number 2 grossing arcade game of all time, number 2. And I think it's a hugely important game. And you can also look at the important games that transcended the arcade and sold home consoles. That's when the Atari 2600 took off, was when they got Space Invaders on the Atari 2600. So very important, very influential. That's my pick, my first pick, Space Invaders.
Solid.
That's a good one. I like how we're bouncing around from like the golden years to like the 90s to the 80s. We're hitting all over the place right now. So it's cool.
And it was the heyday back then.
Oh yeah. It's tough. It's almost tough to pick good ones from that time period because there's so many great iconic ones. That just
it is
back to back to back to back.
And it was just such a different time because you actually didn't have to go to an arcade. Sometimes you'd go into a laundromat. You knew where a laundromat was, man. Go in there. You're gonna have some games. Pizza Hut.
True.
Food chains.
Right.
Just
some of my fondest memories come from the back of a 7-Eleven.
Yeah, absolutely.
7-Eleven, man. Yeah, absolutely.
Even a bus station.
The bus
station. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Greyhound bus station would have like remember one used to have like a Ms. Pac-Man cocktail cabinet.
Cocktail. Yeah. Oh man. And so you missed your bus because you were playing Miss
or somebody stole your clothes, right?
Yeah. Joshua, do you got a number 2 pick for us?
Yes, I do. Now this one is a very interesting game for its time. I'm gonna be honest, I don't think it was one I remember seeing back then, but I knew about it when it came out on home consoles, and that is Dragon's Lair.
Yeah.
Now, back in Dragon's Lair 1983, up until that point, we were used to space shooters, maze games. For a game like Dragon's Lair, which now which featured like actual cartoon animation, which was something like something completely out of the blue, that how does this work? It's like, how do you play a cartoon? Yeah, the concept of, well, you're actually prompted at certain points to move or perform a certain action so that the animation sequence continues. So it's like you're kind of influencing the events of the cartoon, so you have to kind of make it to continue to happen. I mean, that is something that was very, very bizarre for its time, and yet so many more games came out long after. I mean, you had games like Cobra Command, or I think it had another different name, Thunderstorm FX or something like that. You had games like Time Gal, Road Blaster or Road Avenger, Space Ace. So many. I mean, this concept of Laserdisc games, which was really interesting, because I know a buddy of mine collects arcade games, and I saw he has a cliffhanger, and seeing the inside of the cabinet. I remember this was like, I forgot how many years ago this was. It was really impressive to see how the inside of the cabinet was, and there's an actual LD player with the disc running.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's unbelievable, like how a game like that, and it's also, I believe, Dragon's Lair was it the first or one of the earliest games where it cost more than 25 cents to play. It was a 50-cent game.
I remember playing that for $1.
$1. Wow.
That's what triggered my memory as well.
Yeah, because I think it's the production value to go into playing this game is unbelievable, and so many more of its so many more games of its kind came along not long after that. And then it even has a big impact on today's gaming in the form of the quick time events, which I know is a very polarizing concept in video games, but still it had an impact on it. Games like Die Hard Arcade had it, the Warriors, or Resident Evil, some of the Resident Evil games, particularly Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil 5. Yep. It's a game that these types of games, you can't really relax for a second. It's like you always have to be on point, focus exactly what to do next. You have to always keep an eye out for what's flashing. That way, it definitely really tests your reflex. So, I mean, it's all about trial and error. But even when playing, even if you memorize it, sometimes like you're too quick to react, and you're like, even if you're off by that fraction of a second, you lose your life. But it was really cool to see like the animation sequences when you would die. So it definitely was something bizarre, unusual for its time, but proved to be a very popular concept, as there were many more of its kind that came along after that. So definitely Dragon's Lair was definitely a highly influential game in that aspect.
Oh, definitely. That's a great pick. I remember how loud that machine used to be in the arcade that I would get to go to every now and then. You'd walk in and, man, that was the first game you heard, and just awesome. And you'd pay, I remember it 75 cents, I think. And you'd pay your 75 cents and last about 30 seconds. But man, it was cool. that 30 seconds was awesome. Yeah, it's a great pick. Jason.
Yeah, that was such an awesome pick, man, because these games that we're bringing up, I remember a lot of these are ones you waited in line to play, or you watched crowds gather around them. And I watched crowds gather around Dragon's Lair because it was just so amazingly ahead of its time, just an awesome game. And if you think about how long it took from when Dragon's Lair hit the arcades to actually make anything close to that, was like the Sega CD time frame, before we even got close to something like that. That's how ahead of its time that Laserdisc technology was in that hardware. So very impressive, man, and a very, very good pick. So yeah, awesome. All right. Yeah, I got another one. So let's talk about this. So my second one up is Konami's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles from 1989. And so before I get into this game, just kind of like I did with Operation Wolf, I want to give credit to a predecessor here, which is a game I almost picked, and that's Gauntlet in arcade. So I know there's several different Gauntlet iterations. I almost picked one of them to go with because it was really the pioneer of that 4-player co-op type of arcade movement. But again, like Ninja Turtles like Operation Wolf did before, Ninja Turtles kind of cranked it up to 11. It took that 4-player element to the extreme, you know, really kind of broke it wide open. And it really used a licensed property well. So, you know, Ninja Turtles were popular. Ninja Turtles hit me at kind of an awkward stage where I was at the age where I kind of just put away all my toys, but there was part of me that kind of still wanted to play with them, you know? And did you remember that age? So my cousin would come over, he was a couple years younger than me, and he'd bring his Ninja Turtle toys, and ostensibly I'm playing with them to entertain him, but I kind of wanted to check this stuff out because I got that franchise. I thought it was really cool. It was one of those 90s Tude type things like Ren and Stimpy that kind of just throw something weird at the wall and see what sticks, and a lot of the stuff just stuck, you know? So this game was great. It was a 4-player beat 'em up, hack and slash, whatever you want to call it. It's pretty simple controls. You had an attack button and a jump button, and you could use them in different combinations to get a couple different moves. But it didn't have to be too crazy. It just had to be fun, and it was, you know? This game did everything it needed to do with the characters. I mean, you wanted them to behave and look and act a certain way, and they did, you know, and the enemies the same way. You wanted Shredder to be like Shredder and Bebop to be like Bebop, and they were. It just, everything just worked. And, you know, you could play this 1-player, 2-player, 3-player, but it really shined the most when it was all 4 people playing at the same time, because it was just like mayhem, man. There was so much going on the screen. Things were on fire. Things were dropping down. There was tons of sprites on the screen. And this Konami hardware could move some serious 2D sprites, man, without any flicker or slowdown. And that was so refreshing back in the day because we're so used to the NES and things like that. So this game was a powerhouse, you know. And it treated the Turtles well. Like I said, you know, it was just an all-out fun experience. And it's one of those things that really kind of talking about paving the way for future games where it was influential. This licensed property 4-player kind of mode it worked for The Simpsons. I think there was Avengers, X-Men, Spider-Man. This game even got a sequel called Turtles in Time. That was a mainstay for the arcades for years to come. That it wouldn't have happened if this Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game didn't do everything it did so well. So I got this as my number 2 influential, important arcade game on my list.
That's a great pick too. And unfortunately, that was kind of after my time in the arcade, so I never really got to experience that. I do remember seeing, you know, pictures of that huge cabinet with all those, you know, the 4 joysticks and the buttons. Yeah, it looks sweet. All right, well, Lyndon, what do we got?
Well, I'm going to stick to the racing genre. I think that's fitting. So we talked about the first game that had a steering wheel and let you use that for refuel. But now let's talk about the first game.
Let's see it.
More stuff.
I'll give you
That's awesome.
What do we got?
the full experience.
That's so cool.
I remember in the arcade, the coolest thing that I had ever seen was the first cockpit racing game, Pole Position. Released in 1982 by Namco. Now, who did we just say was influenced by the first racing game and stopped all their production of the electromechanical stuff and went right into video games? Here you got 8 years later, they have stepped it up and give us Pole Position. Now, for me, that is the first game that I remember people crowding around because that thing was huge and it was a really nice looking cabinet. It's white, had all those cool graphics on it. And man, when you sit down in that thing, it had the speakers behind you and in front of you, it had the gear shifter up here. And it just felt right. Because, you know, standing up at an arcade game, it's cool, but it ain't quite right. And you can't pull a stool up to that because then the gas pedals are too far away.
That's right.
If you sit in a chair, the steering wheel's up here. So to be able to sit down and then design that to where it's a true experience. You feel like you're in it. And with all the sound, and that game had great sound, it looked great. And oh man, it was so cool. And this was the highest grossing game in Japan in 1982. It was the highest grossing game in the world in 83. And in 83 and 84, it was also the highest grossing in the United States. And then again, it was in the top 5 in 85 in the United States. So this is the most successful and highest grossing racing game from the classic era. And there's a bunch of ports made for this. There's sequels. There's a Pole Position 2, and even some come after that. There was even a Saturday morning cartoon show after Pole Position. And this is also the first racing game that used a real racetrack. It uses the Fuji Speedway in Japan. And the Formula One series still races there today. So if you think about the racing games. They were always there. They were never quite the top thing, but they were always just floating beneath it there. With your early stuff, the space shooters, and then the platformers, the beat 'em ups, the 2-player beat 'em ups, the 4-player beat 'em ups, the one-on-one fighting. In the end, the racing games were left standing. The last 2 raw in the arcades was the racing games. Daytona USA, your Cruising series, your San Francisco Rush series, those games that started moving around and doing all that stuff. Well, they're influenced by pole position and having that real life setting of sitting down in there. And oh man, this was so cool. Like I said, I remember a lot of people crowding around this, and it had a window in the back so you could see through it over the person that was actually playing. People would be crowded in from the side trying to look in and see it. This game was awesome. And it's, again, another one that just appeals to everybody.
Yep.
I don't care who you are, young or old. You see that, you get your wallet out. Yep, here's my dollar. Let me play that. So there you go. That's my 2. Pole position, one of the greatest racing games of all time and one of the most influential. And that's why I had to bring it up tonight. So there you go.
That's a great pick, man.
Yeah.
Nice.
That was like total immersion getting inside that. Man, I don't know, dude. You dropped some knowledge bombs and you broke out the props. I'm just pretty impressed.
I think that might be the first time we've seen Lyndon without his cap on too, right?
Yeah, I know.
There we go. Look at all these things. All these things happen
Next
at once, man.
Next
Cool.
thing you know, Mark's gonna be taking off his sunglasses, man. I don't
I
know.
don't think so.
Whoa.
Oh,
Let's not push it. Let's not push it.
Mark, what do you got for your second pick?
Well, I have been slacking on the props, guys, but I decided to kick it up a notch this week.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh, I see something.
I was really thinking, okay, I had a thought here. All right. I was considering talking about Dance Dance Revolution. Okay. Joel, I think, is the one that really wanted me to talk about Dance Dance Revolution, and in his vast knowledge of rhythm gaming.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's undeniable, right? That Dance Dance Revolution really paved the way for rhythm gaming. But am I going to sit here and talk about, Dance Dance Revolution today? No.
I was hoping.
Sorry, Joel. I'm not going to do that, despite you begging me to do so. However, I am going to talk about NBA Jam. All right. Do you remember when you used to be able to put in the codes to NBA Jam and you get some special characters, like Bill Clinton or Warren Moon or Joel from the Poor Man's Retro Game Room?
Right.
Yeah. Good stuff. Okay. All right. Enough of that. NBA Jam released in 1993. All right. Like I said, this was, when I was going to the arcades. 20,000 cabinets released. Just to put that into context, I was just talking about Street Fighter 2. 200,000 cabinets released. NBA Jam sold 1/10. However, it made 50%. Half as much money, $1.1 billion. Okay. So that's pretty impressive to me, at least. And even though there was games that came before it, like Arch Rivals, which, had the 2-on-2 action, NBA Jam took it to a new level with the licensed teams and the players and their faces, their huge faces that are really recognizable. And that announcer, I mean, come on. Boom shakalaka. We're all thinking it. Yeah.
Actually, I was thinking he's on fire, but still.
I know.
He's on fire. Yeah.
Fire.
Yeah. Really, really loud, entertaining game. It's another 4-player game, I believe, right? Couldn't you play 2-on-2 in the arcade?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think it really was a trendsetter.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of, I know a lot of sports games nowadays are more realistic, but when it comes to arcade sports games, that's the one that I think of.
Yeah, very influential. It had the motion capture, like the, realistic graphics. They took that to another level. Arch Rivals was good in its time, but can't hold a candle to.
I used to love all the secrets,
Yes.
There's so many mysterious things, and at that time you couldn't just research this stuff on the internet. There were guides or hearsay or just
Magazines.
wasn't the large heads like a code unlock you had to do, right?
yeah, you could do big
Yeah,
heads.
you could
do
do
all
big
the
heads.
special, celebrity type people.
Yep.
Yeah.
President.
I think Mortal Kombat characters were also in there as well.
Yeah,
I think
Mortal
that's kind of
Kombat
an
characters
initiative.
you could do.
Yeah.
And NBA licensed and NBA PA licensed as well. They were missing a few of the guys, like I think we kind of talked about.
Yeah.
But
Jordan.
Man,
couldn't play as Michael
awesome.
Jordan, but
No,
No.
Jordan.
no. But that's a great pick.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
that was kind of after my time in the arcade, but one of my first PlayStation games that I got on the launch of the PlayStation that not too long after that. And I fell in love with NBA Jam. Great game.
yeah, once again, just like Street Fighter 2, when I got it for the Super Nintendo, I'm like, wow, another
Yeah.
arcade game that I have at home.
Yeah, that's right. All right, so yeah, I'm gonna show my age again. I'm gonna mention the top grossing arcade game of all time, and it's low hanging fruit. It's obvious, I know, but Pac-Man just took the nation by storm. It took the world by storm. And how many other games can you think of? And it was a really cheesy song, but how many of the arcade games had a song come out about it? Cartoons, merchandising, everything. And I had read somewhere that was the first time Pac-Man was the first time, and it was called Puck-Man in Japan at first. But it had multicolored sprites on the screen at the same time, and I'm thinking Pac-Man was the first one to do that. So you could see in that golden age, that early days, how the technology was just starting to take some jumps and leaps. And of course, then later on into the NBA Jam, Street Fighter 2, and Final Fight, that type of stuff. But Pac-Man was a game, and you would find that game everywhere. Everywhere. I remember it being in a Village Inn that I used to go to eat. It was everywhere. And grocery stores. Mom would go shopping, and I'd bum the quarters off of her and go play some Pac-Man. But it's the top grossing arcade game of all time. 400,000 cabinets sold. $3.5 million in revenue by 1990. That's a lot of money. So, and back then, and of course, you'd have to adjust that for inflation today. But just a huge influential game. And another one of those games where you would see clones and games try to copy it. And and it also, I even would play the lesser Atari 2600 game when I got it, man. Hey, it was Pac-Man to me, and I was playing it. So
I was a fan of it too.
see, there you go. And
I liked it, Ben.
I do too. Yeah, it was one of the, so when I started recollecting my Atari 2600, that was the first game I got, actually, is Pac-Man. So, and it,
Philip,
it's still
since you picked
fun.
Pac-Man. You've got to sing Pac-Man Fever, man. You got to do it.
I can't do it, but I will promise you, in the TV down there, you will see some Pac-Man Fever.
Got to
I
do it.
promise you. I'm not going to sing it because, we don't want everybody,
I ate
clicking
plenty
off
of
the
boxes
video.
of Pac-Man the breakfast cereal too. Man.
There you go.
Pac-Man pasta.
Mhm.
I ate
that's
a lot
right.
of that back then.
Oh,
I
wow.
forgot
and-
about the pasta. Yeah.
You
Forgot
know, the
about
game was it was an eating game. You were eating pellets and you
Yeah.
were eating ghosts, and of course, Pac-Man
definitely made
resembled
sense to
a
make that
pizza. Yeah,
afterwards.
absolutely.
Pac-Man pasta and
Yeah.
cereal.
Pac-Man pasta.
Hey, let's bring it back. Let's bring back Pac-Man.
Let's
and
do
cereal.
it. I would buy Pac-Man cereal.
I'd
Absolutely.
buy the pasta. They had. I think I ate the chicken one probably more than the one with the meatballs. And I think it was probably
That's
the cheese
awesome.
one as well. With
I like the
three
meatballs.
different types that they had for the pasta.
Mhm. That was
That,
good stuff.
bring it back, man.
I mean,
Yeah.
we can't do an episode like this and not have Pac-Man on it, though. You got to
Yeah.
do it. It
Yeah,
has to
Yeah.
be there. So
It
I
does,
mean-
and it was kind of my time frame, but yeah, absolutely. All right, so There we go. Now you know what
Good
time it
picks.
is. It's time for the pop quiz, the lightning round.
Let's do
2
it.
questions today.
Ooh,
First one is going to be a softball. The second one's very, very important.
Uh-oh.
It's crucial. All right. And inspired by Pac-Man. So there you go.
All right.
The first pop quiz. We're gonna put Joshua on the spot. It's not hard. All right. So we're talking about how the arcade was, all the influential, the important games, and we know that consoles tried to emulate and tried to duplicate arcade games. And there were times, though. Can you think of a game that you would rather have played back then, the port on a home console, rather than playing the actual arcade game? And there's a few of them out there, but that's the first question.
Yeah, so a console port of an arcade game.
Right. A console port of an arcade game that you would actually rather play the console game than the arcade game.
Okay, this one's gonna be an interesting one. I could tell you one console game. I know one game that comes to mind, and this is actually feeding off Pac-Man.
Okay.
Was the 16-bit ports for Ms. Pac-Man
Oh yeah.
for the Super Nintendo and Genesis? Well, I mainly played the Genesis one. The reason is because while you had the original mazes, they really expanded upon it by adding completely new mazes to the mix. You had the large size mazes, you had like condensed versions of the arcade mazes. You even had mazes that had like what they call strange, which are arranged very oddly compared to what the arcade was. That's the version that I think that really added so much more to its arcade original. So yeah, Ms. Pac-Man on the Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo.
Hey, that's a great pick. Jason.
And I've got several that jump into my mind right off the bat here, but I'm going to go with one of my most favorite games on the NES for this, and that's Contra. So the Contra home port on the NES was actually not terribly far off from the arcade one, but if you've ever played through the arcade, you realize it's a much shorter, less involved experience. I think they take like the Hangar Zone, the Energy Zone, and Aliens Lair, and they like combine those all into one in the arcade. But on the NES version, those are drawn out into their own kind of unique entities that are actually their own fun, complete levels. And there's a couple other differences too, but overall, I just think that even though the graphics are a little bit better in the arcade, of course, it had the hardware and the muscle to do it. I just think that the NES experience overall was better, and just beat it, and that didn't happen often back then, but in this particular case, it did. No knock on the arcade, but yeah, I'm gonna go Contra on the NES over the arcade.
Yep, and that's one of them that came to my mind as well. Didn't have the graphics. The graphics weren't as good as the arcade, but it was just a funner game, man. I've went back and downloaded the arcade game on Xbox Live, and I was like, man, that is
yeah. And if you played it, you probably know that there's the little things too, like the way that the guys flip. They look like they were pretty stiff in the arcade, and they look like little tight spirals. And then there's just the little things like that it did.
Your
right.
control was much better.
They kind of put it over the top. So I get. I'm glad you get it. But yeah,
yep, good pick. All right, Lyndon.
Well, I'm gonna say Gunsmoke. I made a port for NES.
Yeah.
Now, the reason I say that, the arcade game is great, and the NES game is really good too, of course. The NES game does not look as good. The problem with me on the arcade game, it has 3 buttons. And the middle button shoots forward, and then you got to shoot to this side and that side. And that's fine. It works okay, but sometimes you get lost. You're getting the heat of the battle, and you start shooting the wrong way. I like the way the NES did it because it's, of course, only 2 buttons, so B shoots this way, A shoots that way, and then you hit both to shoot forward. For me personally, I like that better. You can't get lost on the controller playing it like that. And also, this game is very hard. You don't have to keep sticking quarters in it on the NES.
It is. Yeah, I didn't think of that. That's a great pick, man. I love Gunsmoke on the NES.
Oh yeah, me too.
Love it.
That's a good pick because it's it's based on the controls, and I would have to agree. And on that theme, control related, I would say Marble Madness. I never liked the games with the roller ball. where you
track
get your-
ball.
the trackball where you get your your skin from your hand caught in the edge between the ball and the actual
I think
cabinet
Atari
surface.
football was like a really bad example of that, where there was like such like a considerable amount of space between, like, I guess, like that edge of where the
And the
trackball is in a ball itself, and it's such a huge ball. It's like so easy to get your skin.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. And when the ball
I
has a
can
lot
still
of
feel that
momentum,
pain, man. I still feel that pain from all those years ago on my
Yeah.
fingers when you're talking
Yeah.
about it, man.
yeah, he's got
the
this heavy
centipede and
ball.
millipede are okay with that though.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, I think I like the controls on Marble Madness, the home port, more.
That's funny,
Very-
Mark. I think they're going to come for you on that one because everybody I hear always says that they hate the NES port because they miss the trackball so
They want the
much.
ball.
Really?
We'll see who comes out of the
But,
woodwork for that one.
You know,
That's all right.
That's all right. That's controversial. Well, okay. So mine was back in the day. I played Tecmo Bowl for the first time at the arcade. Graphics are sweet. It's fun. Don't get me wrong. But man, it ain't Tecmo Bowl on the NES. Tecmo Bowl on the NES is just awesome, man. It is awesome. You had the big sprites in the arcade and the huge field, and it was cool. But I would still, if I had my pick, I'd play it on the NES. So, all right. So that's our first question. Second question, very important, inspired by Pac-Man. I don't know how I got there, but a little bit. All right, Joshua, pineapple on your pizza, yes or no?
Oh God, no.
Jason.
Yeah, fruits and meats don't mix with me too much. I'm going to go no on that one.
All right, got 2 no's. Lyndon.
No thanks.
B.
We don't do that in the South.
Mark.
It's a no from me.
Wow.
Okay, well, it must be a Colorado thing because I love pineapple on my pizza.
It's okay.
Don't get me wrong. I know people that dig it. But me personally,
It's okay, Joe. We'll still have you back next time.
Yeah.
I hope so. It is kind of, I feel like I came out of the closet a little bit there as a pineapple.
You got that one wrong, but you got the other pop question right. So we'll give
All right. Well, we had a good time tonight. This was a blast.
This was
We're
fun.
gonna have to do this again, and we're gonna have you back, Joshua.
Thank you.
Thanks
for
so
yeah.
much for accepting that
Yeah,
invite, Josh.
thanks
It
for
was
joining.
great.
Thanks. Thank you guys.
Yeah, it was awesome. And make sure and check out everybody's channel. We're going to have links in the description. I'm going to put cards up for our retro gaming roundtable, and Joshua here. We're going to put the card up so you can go check out his YouTube channel. And just for a few minutes, Joshua, if somebody hasn't seen your YouTube channel, can you kind of just give a rundown of the kind of content you create?
Oh yeah, sure. As the name implies, I do a lot of videos related to the library of the TurboGrafx and Neo Geo, whether it be individual game reviews. I also do list videos based on their libraries. I've done arcade to console comparisons. In the past, I've done arcade tour videos, arcade gameplay. It's like a little hodgepodge of console and arcade videos.
Yeah. Well, we're all fans of your channel, man.
Thanks.
So it's been an
Great
honor to
content.
have you. I guess that's it, man. I think we got everything. Don't forget to put in the comments, your favorite arcade memories, the games that we missed that you feel should have been on our list. Put them in the comments, and join us on the Discord server. It'll be in the description there. So, all right, guys, thank you. And we want to wish you a safe and happy rest of your day.
All right.